that it's gut check time. So I don't think it's going to boil down much to the X's and O's.
You know what else was enjoyable more was Game 5 of the NBA Finals, unless you're a Phoenix Suns fan, in which case it was probably terrible after the first quarter.
Right, that's why Gerald didn't come on. We were planning on to have Gerald on today, and that's what, you know what, he said intranet issues. I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah, he sabotaged his internet. We will have him on later this week, hopefully to discuss a Game 7, knock on wood, or to discuss what's next for both of these teams. But yeah, so the Suns jump out to a huge lead, 16 points at the end of the first quarter. The Bucks battled back right away with Giannis on the bench, which was very impressive. Yeah. And then it is just a back and forth seesaw. The Bucks jump out to a double-digit lead in the second half. The Suns take a nice surge late, and it is anyone's game with one possession left. And then, Drew Holiday forces a Devin Booker turnover, throws the most audacious alley-oop that you would ever see in that position. Giannis dunks it home, and the Bucks are heading home now, up 3-2 in the finals, with a chance to close it out Tuesday. So, we talked a lot about the finals with Ty the other day as well. Yeah. We talked a lot about the Bucks adjustments. Now the Bucks have won 3 straight, so I think we should focus more on the Suns today and what they need to do.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of conversation on Twitter throughout the game about Devin Booker, who had his second straight 40-point game. But there was a lot of is he leaning too much into iso ball, not getting his teammates involved enough? What's your take on, the Suns really just their offensive outlook, I guess, especially after that first quarter?
That's interesting. I didn't see that talk because I simply don't have the opportunity to watch the games live at this point. The games tip off at 3 a.m., which is just a little bit too late for me, so I catch them earlier next morning. So all the Twitter live reactions, I am not aware of that. That is a real criticism right now, that he's going to ISO, because it's not something that I personally have picked up on watching the games. It's not where I'm sitting going, oh my god, he's being audacious and taking over possessions. So given that I didn't notice that at all, I guess you have my answer there.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, in part, it feels out of necessity because Drew has done such a good job on Chris Paul that, they're putting the ball in Booker's hands earlier and having him orchestrate. And then, really, there are 3 options from that point, because Drew is basically, when he's on Chris Paul, he's removing Chris Paul from the play. So you can either, if you're Booker, you can either take the shot yourself, you can try to pass it to Ayton, or you can drive and kick to one of Crowder or Bridges or Cam Johnson, whoever's on the floor with you, drive and kick to one of them for an open 3-pointer. But
see, that's actually where I wanted to focus, if anything. The wings. Okay. No, because instead of putting the fault at Devin Booker's feet, why is Mikal Bridges shooting less than 10 times per game in this series? Why is Jay Crowder?
I think that's kind of, those two things go hand in hand, right? I think people are saying Booker is trying to put too much on his own shoulders, and that's what they want. They want more Mikal Bridges and more Jay Crowder. Jay started very hot. I think it was in the second quarter when the Bucks were making that run, he missed 2 in a row and then just kind of disappeared offensively for the rest of the night.
But I think that's more of a scheme thing than it's a Booker thing. I mean, we're seeing them clear everything out. And then Booker that's a play for him. And whether he shoots or he makes a pass, that is the creative freedom that he has. And I think he's making the most of those situations. I think the Bucks are staying home on these guys, like Jay and Mikal, a lot. But what I want to see is, how do you get them open? You asked me last time we recorded, what should the Suns do to free up Chris Paul? Well, now I want to talk about that just with Jay and with Mikal instead, because you need those guys to have big games. You need them to shoot a little bit more. You need to keep it a little bit more honest. Also, Ayton, I feel, is being a little bit underutilized offensively now. I mean, there are definitely minutes on the court where I sit there and going, they should get him some deep post touches because it's there, and instead they're just trying to work it out to the corners instead. I don't know if they're just, I don't want to use the word afraid. I don't think if you're in the NBA Finals, you're afraid of anything. That's what but I think they are maybe a little bit less enthused about getting into the paint because you have a Brook Lopez, you have a Giannis who definitely can go from the top of the free throw line down to the low block in a matter of half a second. You have Chris Middleton with long arms, so there's just a lot of activity around the rim. So maybe that's just a result of them trying to avoid the middle.
Yeah, there was the one possession in the fourth quarter, and I think Mark Jackson afterward was like, that's just a bad possession, whereas it was like Ayton trying to create on his own. And it was a close game. The Suns are trying to like mount this comeback, and Ayton catches the ball at the elbow and is like trying to create one-on-one against Brook Lopez, which is a bad possession. You're right. Like if you're trying to get Ayton going, I agree he needs to be more involved offensively. You want to get him where he can just catch and shoot, basically, or like make a very quick decision. The more time that he has the ball in his hands, the less time I feel good about that actual possession going well. I think you're right about it. It just feels like the Bucks, like the story of this entire series right now is the Bucks' size has really started to overwhelm Phoenix. Like they've really started to figure out, we're just bigger than these dudes. And now Bud, Jeff Teague was a abomination in the first half of that game because he came in because Drew Holiday got in foul trouble with a -11 in 8 minutes, and then Bud just excised him from the rotation. Mm-hmm. And we started to see these like supersized lineups with Giannis, Bobby Portis, and Brook Lopez all on the floor together. And as we talked about, as soon as Dario went down, the Suns just don't have a ton of big guys. Like you've got some wings in Crowder and Bridges, and Johnson is Johnson's their second biggest player right now, right? And he's not like a burly, rugged big man. So it's like,
no, he's long, 6'8".
Yeah. So I know the rebounding battle was pretty even last night, but it feels like the Bucks tend to come up with big offensive rebounds in particular at key moments. And it seems like the Suns are just being deterred because of the Bucks' size. They are being deterred from going into the paint. So they are taking just a ton of jump shots, and they are a great jump shooting team. So, make or miss league. Like a few possessions go one way or the other, and the Suns could be up 3-2 in this series. Right. The Suns could have won this series. Game 4 was just as close. But yeah, it's something that they need to figure out going into Game 6, and I don't know what the answer is other than, undo time and have Dario not tear his ACL in Game 1.
Right. It's amazing to me how the Suns right now are losing this series. They're almost as a team at 50-40-90. They're at 50-40-86. So I think it's fair to say that the offense just isn't a problem. Like as a team, they have a true shooting percentage of 60.4. Like I just cannot put it at the feet of their offense. It's like they are generating the right looks, the right shot amounts. Like maybe late game execution is a thing. Maybe there is like times where the Bucks just assert themselves, but I think a lot of it also just comes down to how to phrase this, because it's not hunger or willingness. Both of these teams are hungry. Both of these teams want it. I hate that whole mantra of one team wanted it more. I don't think it boils down to that, but I do think the Bucks may be a little bit more experienced. They haven't been in the finals before, this is true, but they have made somewhat deep playoff runs before. They have accustomed to the playoffs. It seems like they just know which buttons to press late in games after being shocked in Game 2, I think, by just losing that one. I think they expected to come in Game 2 and be more competitive than they actually ended up being. So I think now they lock themselves in. They're doing something that just is deterring Phoenix from getting to the right spots late in games, and we're seeing the results of it. What I love, though, is the adjustments and counter adjustments. I mean, this has been a game of chess. We should really take a minute just to appreciate just the level of quality that we're seeing. Even when we're sitting here talking about how can Phoenix fix this and that, okay, that aside, like, it's not big issues because both of these teams are playing fantastic basketball. I mean, we have not had a game without a 40-point performance since game 1. We have had, 5 40-pointers since then, 2 in the same game. Back-to-back 40 performances by Giannis and back-to-back 40-pointers from Devin. This is brilliant basketball. We're seeing switching. We're also seeing old school basketball with guys scoring in the paint, which has really nullified all the old guns, like in the NBA atmosphere. Like, oh, the game is all perimeter. All they're doing is jacking threes. If you're still of that opinion, go watch the 2021 NBA Finals, because that is not true. This has just been a phenomenal brand of basketball all throughout the first 5 games. And, we can sit here and split hairs and going, well, should Devin pass a little bit more? What can they do? Should we get Mikal Bridges a little bit more involved? At the end of the day, these are just marginal decisions, which, could make a difference. But, I mean, they're playing really well, all things considered. I mean, after watching every game, I'm left with a positive image of the Suns. I just think Milwaukee played better.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it well. It wasn't, Phoenix's offense was not necessarily the problem last night. It was like after the first quarter, it just felt like they could not get a stop in the second or the third quarter at all. Like, I'm sure Milwaukee did not score on every single trip down the floor, but it felt like they did.
It certainly felt like it, yeah.
And it also, about what can Phoenix do to fix this, it is not to take away anything from Milwaukee. Milwaukee's playing incredibly good defense. I think that needs to be said. Phoenix has been a buzzsaw offensively throughout these playoffs, and I don't think it's a coincidence that all of a sudden they are struggling to generate efficient offense. Even, Booker's had back-to-back 40s, but the degree of difficulty on a lot of his shots is absurd. He's just that good of a player that he's still able to make them. Mm-hmm. But it's not they're slicing. In game 1, they destroyed the Bucks defense. Ever since then, game 2, they just rained hellfire from 3. But, that was still, the Bucks played better defensively in game 2. And really, I mean, this is a perfect way to seg into it. We need to have a Drew Holiday appreciation minute here. Yep. Because, I mean, that was what we were talking about with Ty going into game 5. Ideally, Drew Holiday would not shoot 4 of 20 from the field. He could start making open layups. He started making open layups last night. We had the Drew Holiday game that Bucks fans have been waiting for. 27 points, 13 assists, makes the game-saving defensive play as well. There was a lot, did the Bucks overpay for Drew Holiday? Probably. Might they regret that extension? Possibly. Is it going to matter when they are 1 game from a title if they win this thing? No, they don't care. This is why you trade for Drew Holiday. Anyone who thought Drew Holiday was only a marginal upgrade over Eric Bledsoe and you can't give up 5 first-round picks for a guy who's only made an All-Star game 7 years ago. Yes, you can, because he's going to come up with, even when his offense isn't there, which it wasn't in game 4, his defense, taking Chris Paul out of this series, has been worth the price of admission. Then game 5, adding the offense on top of his already elite defense. He's been phenomenal, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, overall, it's been a subpar series for him offensively.
Yeah.
Yeah. But defensively, he's been outstanding, and it carried them to a point where everything he gave you offensively was just cream. And then he had this explosion last night, which was just, I mean, what the hell could Phoenix do in that endeavor, right? I mean, like you said, in game 2, it was Phoenix just raining hailfire from 3. Well, last night, it was Milwaukee just not necessarily for free, but everywhere. I mean, they were just so competent all over. By the way, for those on YouTube watching, there's a fly around the camera. I apologize. It is warm. It is very warm here in Copenhagen right now, so they seek insight. But no, you're absolutely right. He had one of those great games last night, and he can just give the Bucks 60% of what he did offensively last night in game 6, then that trophy is going to Milwaukee.
Yeah. So let's move into Game 6. When we recorded last, the Suns were still technically favored, presumably because they had home court advantage. But as we noted at the time, it felt like Milwaukee had swung momentum their way. Well, now up 3-2 going back home for Game 6. The odds have flipped as well, according to FanDuel Sportsbook. The Bucks are now a minus 390 favorite to win the NBA championship. The Suns are a plus 330. So it seems like bettors, honestly, it seems like they're expecting this thing to be over at 6. The Bucks are a 5-point favorite in Game 6 as well. How do you see this thing playing out? Like I asked this question before Game 5, like, do the Suns just need to go back to the drawing board, or is it doesn't really feel like that, right? Like, the games have been so close, but how do the Suns get over the hump that they haven't been able to in these last 2 games?
You know, that it's gut check time, so I don't think it's going to boil down much to the X's and O's. These guys have played 5 games. I don't know how many minutes. I mean, you look at Devin Booker. He's been on the court for 195 minutes. I think these teams are now accustomed to each other, and they know what they want. Every card has been played. I would definitely be shocked if it hadn't, because at this point, you got to give it everything that you got. So I don't think it's as much about tactics and all that. This is about coming out and making shots. This is about coming out and matching every move that there's made by doing something else. So you can't let Milwaukee get out to like a 7-0 run to start the games. You can't, in the middle of a random quarter, let them have a 10-0 run. Like, you have to be on top of them every single time. You have to execute, whatever that means. If that's layups, if that's mid-range pull-ups, if it's threes, does not matter. It's simply a question of limiting what the Bucks are doing and trying to respond. That is all you have right now. Which sounds very emotional, but I mean, that's also how it is. I mean, you can't remember how NBA teams, when they prepare, they have like 3 or 4 sentences on the whiteboard before games. It's not like an essay that players have to remember. I would imagine a game like this, where emotions will be on their sleeves, it's like 1 sentence, like it's 1 key element, like stop transition or something like that. It's going to be very simple.
Or just as simple as like execute your offense or execute your defense. Like, know your assignments and just do what you're supposed to do. I do want to ask about this, because I noticed this when I was looking earlier today. So right now, for Finals MVP, Giannis, to absolutely no one's surprise, is the favorite at minus 430.
Gas.
Oh, I guess it's switched. Earlier today, Chris Paul was favored over Devin Booker. Now it's Devin Booker is over. So Chris Paul is, now he was a plus 700. Now he's plus 700. Before he was plus 650. Devin Booker was plus 700, but those have flipped. And I didn't understand that at all. And I don't even understand it being as close as it is there. Like, I feel like if the Suns are going to win this thing, if they come back and win the series, Devin Booker had a bad game 3, but Chris Paul had a great game 1. Pretty good game 2. Bad game 3, bad game 4, off and on game 5. It's hard for me to, other than the narrative, Chris Paul, first ring, blah, blah, blah. Based on what's happened so far, I don't understand Devin Booker not being far ahead if Phoenix is going to win. He seems like he's the clear-cut MVP choice.
Right. I think you and I actually said that the one scenario would be if Devin goes off and averages 40, which he's done over the past 2. But you're right about the game last night. I mean, when you look at the box score, Chris was 21 points, 11 assists, 9 of 15 from the field, 3 of 3 from downtown. I feel that stat line is a little bit misleading, because when you watch the game, it did not feel as though that was it's difficult to quantify, but you didn't feel as though he was that much in control as the stat line indicated. So I agree with you that I would actually go as far as saying that his game 5 was average, despite the very elite line, which is insane when you really think about it, because the defense wasn't really there. He didn't really step up when he needed to. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that right now, if the Suns are going to come back, it's probably Devin's. However, if they come back and win 2 games in a row here, and it's Chris Paul leading the way, him playing like MVP caliber basketball, then I can definitely see that swing back in his favor. I don't think this is a dead race by any chance.
Yeah, I don't either. I just thought, given what's happened so far, I didn't think it should be as close as it is. But I'm with you, of course. If Chris Paul, if Devin Booker has 2 bad games, Chris Paul has 2 great games, and the Suns end up winning the series, obviously it goes to Chris Paul. It's just...
now.
Yeah. And you're right about Game 5. It feel like he started well, ended well, but in those middle 2 quarters where the Bucks went on their run, I mean, that, I guess, is another time where the Twitter narrative might have influenced his thinking, but a lot of people were asking, like, what's wrong with Chris Paul? And I mean, one, he has torn ligaments in his wrist, so he is injured.
He had the shoulder early in the playoffs. There's a lot wrong.
Right, he had COVID a couple weeks ago too. Like, he's basically a walking infirmary at this point.
Right.
But too, I mean, Drew Holiday, again, it goes back to Drew Holiday. He is that good. He is that guy defensively, and they are just putting, it's like whoever they put Drew on, you're just gonna have a bad time. And Chris Paul has been getting the Drew assignment more. They switched Drew on to Booker for a while last night, but then they put him right back on Chris Paul in the 4th quarter. I think it's been really smart of Bud, which I did not expect to say very much in these finals, but honestly...
No, he's had a good finals.
Yeah, he really had. The adjustments he's been making in terms of his rotation, leaning into their size, putting Drew on Chris is not rocket science. Put your best defender on their best guard,
right,
or on their like head of the snake. But it really has taken Chris out of the game to an extent that we haven't seen yet, really, in these playoffs. And it goes back to, sure, Devin can roast you, he can drop 40, but he ended up with 3 assists. Like, if you can make them go into more isolation and not beat you with their pick and rolls and their rotations, then they're not going to force you into defensive breakdowns. Like, if they beat you with difficult shot making, so be it. You have to live with it. You can't stop everything, but you don't want to have, them executing their sets at such a high efficiency they are creating wide open looks for a Mikal Bridges, where he is taking 10 shots a game, 6 of which from 3, 4 or 5 of which he'll hit. So yeah, I think, the what's wrong with Chris Paul narrative is, I still think it's dumb, and if they end up losing this series, it's going to suck. But I don't want that to be a referendum, like, oh, this is Chris Paul choking in the playoffs again. No, This is just a really good defensive team putting the clamps on him.
You're right. I mean, and by the way, you work for Bleacher Report, so I'm looking forward to if the Suns lose, you guys will probably be the first outlet to come out and say, you know what, Chris Paul shouldn't get 3 years, $100 million.
Yeah. It's definitely coming. Yeah. I have pre-wrote a piece pretty much before the finals started about guys who have earned themselves a lot more money in the playoffs. And Chris Paul was on there because I did not think it was realistic for him to decline that $44.2 million player option. And, he's reportedly going for a 3-year, $100 million contract that seemed lofty at the time. Now it doesn't. I mean, regardless of what happened, like him getting the Suns to this point, if Phoenix doesn't pay, the Knicks will. Someone will. So he was on there, and I'm not going to change it. Like, regardless of what happens, he's earned himself that kind of cash, and I don't think the Suns should have any real hesitation in paying him.
No, I agree.
What's the alternative, I guess, is the... we'll go into
Jeff Teague.
Oh, God. Yeah.
No, but one thing is, it's also interesting just in terms of the financial components, because there's another guy on Phoenix who definitely will get a raise, and that's Cameron Payne.
Yep.
But I think his play in the finals may have seen his value drop just a little bit. Like, I remember going after the conference finals, like, this guy could get like 15, 16 million a year from some team. I after the finals here, I think that is probably a little bit too much. He looked like his trajectory was going the right way, and then like he's been okay, but he hasn't had that, you know, that steady level of consistency where you go, oh yeah, he's been reliable every single game. Let me look it over. Has he had one game in double figures?
Game
one with 10. Yeah, so barely. So one game there from, and there he's been pretty inconsistent since then. So that might be an X factor for game 6.
Yeah.
Like him coming in off the bench and getting the offense going and hitting some open shots and moving the ball and doing something, that might actually be one of those crucial elements.
Yeah, he's actually on that list of players who are in it as well. But I agree with you. It feels like non-taxpayer mid-level feels like.
Yeah. Like the 9.5 roughly.
Yeah. Right. Like somewhere in the 4 years, it'll be a little over 40 million. Like 4 years, 45 million, somewhere around there. That seems.
That's a good contract for campaign. That's generational wealth right there.
Right. Yeah. He earned $2 million this year. Like that's still a huge raise for him. But I would hesitate. I don't think he's at the point where I would trust him as one of the best backup point guards in the NBA. I don't think you want him as your starting point guard if you have legitimate title aspirations.
No, not if you have no, you're right. But I do think there's certain teams out there that might have scoring guards who are looking at Payne going, if he could become a steady, reliable point guard, then why not?
You're just hoping the Bulls don't overpay Dennis Schroeder. I see.
Oh, well, that is one thing. I'm not even talking about them necessarily, but just, I mean, we're seeing the whole backcourt ideology developing from this postseason run with the Suns, right? Like when you have dynamic guards who can score the ball at a high clip, you need guys who can come in and facilitate a little bit while also creating their own shots. I mean, Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell is another example in Utah. So I think there might be some teams out there going, we have this explosive guard. We have someone who can really put the ball in the basket. So if we can have a point guard next to this guy who can maximize his efficiency or whatever, then they might go for it. But we'll see. I mean, look, free agency is not it is not far away, Bryan. It is about 2 weeks away.
That's true.